It was supposed to be the launch party of our collection that night. Instead, I found my fiancé with my best friend, and learned they'd planned to steal my company too. The betrayal didn't break me. It lit the match. I didn't cry. I vanished. I built a life in Florence, now I'm back, not for revenge. For triumph. The day started like a dream. A sky as smooth as silk, the city humming in quiet rhythm, and the final preparations for the most important night of my life underway. My launch collection, Blake and Ivory, was set to debut at the Ellington rooftop in front of a full house of fashion critics, brand scouts and investors. And Liam Carter, my fiancé, had promised to meet me at noon to rehearse our short thank you speech. Only, he didn't show up. He didn't answer texts or calls either. Maybe he's just running behind, Harper said lightly, tucking a loose curl behind her ear as she sorted through the garment bags. You know Liam, probably stuck in a meeting with those insufferable VC guys. I nodded distractedly, but something felt off. Liam always ran late, sure. But never on days like this. Not when my entire future hinged on perfection. Not when he'd watched me spend every night the past month sketching under studio lights until my fingers went numb. Still, I pushed the worry aside. I had more pressing things to focus on. Models were arriving. Naomi, my assistant, was wrangling PR reps. I had to check the final lining on the closing gown. An ivory silk sheath embroidered with copper thread like fire. My signature piece. Harper smiled, looping her arm through mine. Everything's going to be flawless tonight, babe. You made it. Don't overthink it. And just like that, I believed her. It wasn't until later, almost an hour before the dress rehearsal, that I realized I'd forgotten the backup design boards in my private studio. Naomi, can you stall the stylists? I asked. I need 20 minutes. Want me to go instead? She offered. No, I've got it. I'll be faster. Everything's sorted into sets. I'll grab and go. I grabbed my coat and keys and headed down to the converted loft on Fifth Avenue, where Liam had once surprised me with red wine and handwritten labels for my sewing kits. It was the space where I had built my brand. The place that had held every raw dream and every breakdown. The place I thought was sacred. When I walked through the door, the air was strangely still. The lights were off, but I could hear movement. Fabric rustling. Soft laugh. Then a voice I knew too well. Deep, amused, intimate. Don't wrinkle it. She'll notice. I'm wearing her design, Liam. Isn't that the point? My body froze. Oh, it couldn't be. I stepped inside and the world cracked open. Harper was perched on my drafting table, my limited edition silk wrap clinging to her hips. Liam stood between her legs, hands splayed against her waist, his mouth at her neck. Neither of them noticed me at first. Not until I dropped my keys. The sound was small. But in that echoing studio it may as well have been a bomb. They turned. Harper's eyes widened. Liam pulled back like he'd been slapped. Me? I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I walked forward slowly and looked Harper dead in the eye. You missed a loose thread, I said, pointing at the hem of the dress. Stitchwork sloppy. But then again, so are you. Her cheeks flushed crimson. Sierra, Liam started. No. Don't speak. I turned to him next. You're wearing the cufflinks I gifted you for our anniversary. The ones you said made you feel like the man you wanted to be. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the betrayal on his skin. Guess you lied about that too. Liam opened his mouth. Closed it. Said nothing. The silence grew unbearable. So I ended it. I'm canceling our engagement. Harper's mouth parted, shocked. Wait, this doesn't have to. I turned to her, gaze sharp. You think this ends with you wearing my dress and him warming your seat? She flinched. I grabbed the design boards I came for, tucked them under my arm and walked to the door. But before I stepped out, I looked over my shoulder once. I don't know what's worse, I said softly. That you did this, or that you thought I'd stay silent. Back at the venue, Naomi took one look at me and knew. What happened? I handed her the design boards. You were right. Her jaw clenched. Do I need to kill someone? Not yet, I said, voice steady. But I might need you to hold my earrings later. The show must go on. At least that's what I told myself as I stood backstage while the crowd settled in. The models were lined up, lights gleamed, and the music started to pulse. But I felt hollow. Like the love I thought I'd spent years building had just been exposed for what it really was. A performance. I walked out after the final model and waved as the audience roared. People shouted my name. Camera flashes lit up the skyline. Somewhere Harper and Liam were probably sipping champagne and laughing over their coup. But tonight I was going to let them think they'd won. Because the real victory would come later. In silence. In strategy. In fire. After the after-party, I sat on the edge of my bathtub, still in my gown, staring at the ring I'd ripped off my finger. I should have cried. Had I smiled. Because if betrayal had a sound, I'd finally heard it. No. It was my turn to make noise. I barely had time to process the first betrayal before the second one knocked the wind out of me. It was the next morning, just 10 hours after I had found my fiancé tangled up in my best friend's body, after I'd walked the runway with shattered dignity stitched into the hem of every dress. The world thought I was glowing from success. But beneath the surface, I was balancing rage like a blade on my tongue. And then Jenna called. "Sis," she chirped like nothing was wrong. "Just wanted to let you know everything's handled on Dad's side of the estate. You don't have to worry about a thing." Something in her tone gave me pause. "Handled how?" I asked, still holding the phone to my ear with one hand while scrolling through emails on my laptop. She paused. Just a second too long. "Oh, just the boring stuff. You know, tax filings, deeds. I signed where needed. The agent was great." My blood turned cold. "I never got any documents to sign," I said flatly. "Well, I mean, technically I had power of attorney after Dad's stroke, remember? Just finishing what he'd want. I want the papers, Jenna. Now." "Sierra, don't be dramatic. Email them. Now." I hung up before she could answer. Naomi, who had just stepped into my loft with 2 iced lattes and a murder-ready stare, immediately froze. "What happened now?" "My sister," I said, the words thick and sharp. "She just sold our family property." Naomi blinked. "Wait. The house. The house. The one Mom was born in. The one Dad left to both of us in writing." "Oh hell no." She put down the coffee like it insulted her ancestors. "Tell me you're kidding." I opened my email. And there was an attached scanned copy of the signed deed. Signed on behalf of me. The signature wasn't even close to mine. But the buyer? Nathan Marsh. The same man I had rejected a business merger with months ago. The same man who tried to leverage our family land for a real estate project I refused to support. Jenna had sold it to him. For less than half the market value. I drove straight to the family lawyer's office. No warning. No appointment. He looked up as I entered, startled. "Sierra, I thought you'd be in New York." "Save it," I said, slamming the printed deed on his desk. "Did you approve this?" He adjusted his glasses and reviewed the file. "She brought this in last week. Said you'd be traveling and that she had verbal confirmation." "Verbal confirmation isn't binding." "She provided an audio file." I narrowed my eyes. "Play it." He hit the spacebar. And sure enough, it was my voice. But the audio was spliced. Chopped together from past phone calls and conversations. I heard my tone shift mid-sentence like a jigsaw puzzle of lies. "She doctored it," I said, mouth dry. She faked my consent." The lawyer sat back in silence. "I'm filing for deed nullification and civil fraud," I said. "And I want to initiate an injunction against the buyer." He nodded. "I'll begin immediately." I left the office shaking. Not from fear. From fury. There are betrayals that break you. And then there are betrayals that build something new, cold and dangerous and carved from fire. This time I wasn't waiting for a moment to gather my strength. I was going to ruin Jenna. Right now. That night she was hosting a charity fundraiser downtown. It was her favorite performance. Fake tears, glossy smiles, pretending to be the philanthropic younger sister, while I played the ambitious workaholic. I wore red. A siren shade. No apologies. No armor. Just vengeance in lipstick and silk. Naomi came with me. She wore a tailored jumpsuit and the face of a woman ready to light someone on fire. As we stepped into the hall, Jenna spotted us from the center of the room. She froze mid-conversation. I could see the gears grinding behind her eyes. I didn't let her speak. Instead, I walked straight to the podium near the floral centerpiece and tapped the mic. "Good evening," I said with a smile. "I'm Sierra Blake. Some of you may know me as a designer. But tonight I'm here as a daughter. As a sister. As a victim of fraud. The crowd went still. Jenna stood like a statue, horror dawning across her face. I was just informed that my sister, Jenna Blake, forged documents in my name to sell our family property, I said clearly. Not for charity. Not to help the community. But to hand it over to a man we swore we'd never trust. Lies. Jenna hissed, pushing through the guests. I turned the mic off, pulled out a speaker and played the edited audio file from my phone, complete with evidence of manipulation and matching voice samples. Gasps rippled. Naomi added the cherry on top. She also rerouted the payment to her private investment account, she called out, handing copies to the journalists in attendance. We brought receipts. Jenna looked at me like I had destroyed her. He was right. I had. She lunged toward the mic, but security, whom Naomi had conveniently briefed in advance, stepped between us. Remove her, I said calmly. And they did. The last thing I saw was her stiletto slipping as they dragged her off the platform. Poetic. The press ran with it. Fashion queen exposes sister's fraud at charity gala. Betrayed twice, Blake burns the liars down. I didn't issue a statement. I didn't need to. My revenge was elegant. 2 days later, I sold my remaining stake in Blake and Ivory to a silent partner overseas. I packed my sketchbooks, my hard drives, my grandmother's scarf, and booked a one-way flight to Florence, a city I had always dreamed of, where color was worshipped and art was language. No one knew, except Naomi, and she only said 4 words when I told her. Don't look back. Ever. The plane took off into a dusky sky, and with it so did the version of me who begged people to stay. They say silence can be healing. But on a plane flying thousands of feet above everything I'd ever known, silence felt more like a wound that had finally stopped screaming. I stared out the window, watching clouds drift below like stretched-out bones. My hands still smelled faintly of lavender soap from Signora Rossi's guest house, the only thing familiar in this new beginning. Sometimes he'd ask about a stitch or a choice of color. Once he casually placed a book on biomaterial innovations on my desk before walking away without a word. No name written inside. No post-it note. But I knew it was from him. The next day I left a pattern draft pinned to his mentor board with a single word scribbled on the bottom. Thanks. He didn't acknowledge it. But I noticed him sketching something with a curve nearly identical to my stitch line later that evening. The turning point came on a rainy Thursday. The power flickered during our late class session. Most students left early, but I stayed, frustrated with a panel that refused to fold correctly. I was bent over the form, half cursing under my breath when I felt someone walk in. Reese. He set his umbrella against the door and peeled off his jacket. You know you're allowed to leave when the lights go out, right? I'm allergic to unfinished work, I replied. He chuckled. Good. I'm allergic to mediocrity. We worked side by side for the next 2 hours. Not talking. Just existing in a quiet, shared rhythm. The storm thrashed against the windows. Inside he adjusted my mannequin height without asking. I handed him pins without looking. Our movements synchronized before our voices did. Finally he broke the silence. You remind me of someone. Yeah. I asked, half focused on folding the crepe edge. Myself, he said simply. That made me look up. He wasn't flirting. He was just saying it. Like a truth he didn't mind giving away. After that night something shifted. He started walking me home. Always stopping a few feet before the guest house entrance, as though knowing not to cross the invisible line I wasn't ready for anyone to step past. We didn't hold hands. But sometimes his shoulder brushed mine. Just enough to remind me I wasn't walking alone anymore. I didn't tell him about Liam. Or Harper. Or Jenna. Not because I was hiding. But because I didn't want those names polluting this space. This breath of newness I was building. What I did tell him was this. I used to be a name people whispered about. Scandal. Worse. Style blogs. He laughed. It made the whole piazza feel warmer. The first time he touched me was at the fabric market near San Lorenzo. I reached for a roll of ivory silk at the same time he did. Our hands brushed. I froze. He didn't. Just wrapped his fingers around the bolt and said quietly, "You first." And it wasn't about the fabric at all. The next morning there was a coffee waiting for me on my sewing machine. No name. No note. But he smiled when I picked it up. And I smiled back. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something better. A beginning that didn't feel like a trap. A presence that didn't press against my wounds. I started drawing again. Really drawing. Not just for assignments but for myself. Gowns with sweeping lines like cathedral arches. Layers of muslin shaped like resilience. Laces that didn't bind, they breathed. And he noticed. Reese always noticed. "You're not designing pain anymore," he said one evening. I looked at the sketch in my hand. "No," I murmured. "I'm designing proof." He nodded. "Good. You've survived enough." We were in New York. Yes, you heard it right, New York, for the Sustainable Textile Conference, where I had been invited to speak on a panel about innovative material fusions. One of the youngest panelists ever, apparently. Not that it mattered. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to reclaim. Naomi met us at the airport with oversized sunglasses and a picket sign that said, "Welcome home to the woman who survived hell and made it a brand." Reese laughed as she pulled me into a bear hug. "I need 5 outfits, 2 excuses to leave early, and 1 reason not to commit arson if Liam shows up," she said without missing a beat. I squeezed her hand. "He's not even on my radar." The first day of the conference was a blur of microphones, flashes, and murmurs of my name. "Sierra Blake? She's here. I heard she's the one who did the floating thread sculpture in Milan." She came back. I wore a fitted ink-black pantsuit stitched with my signature tension thread detailing. Sharp, sleek, quiet power. Reese stood beside me, effortlessly composed, wearing a navy suit I had designed for him myself. A clean-cut silhouette that made everyone wonder who he was. People stared. "Let them. Your presentation was brilliant," Reese whispered to me as we stepped down from the panel stage. "You didn't just present. You owned the room." I smiled, a small private one just for him. "You being here helped." He slid his hand to the small of my back. "Not possessive. Proactive. I'm always here." It wasn't until the end of day 2 that I saw him. He was lingering at the edge of the after-hours networking event. Suit a little tighter than I remembered, confidence still too loud for the room. I saw the moment he spotted me. That flicker in his eyes. Then that slow, arrogant smile he always wore before saying something stupid. I leaned toward Reese. "The ghosts arrived. Want me to handle it?" he murmured, brows lifting. "No," I said, setting down my glass. "Let me have fun." He approached too quickly, like he had practiced the walk in his head. "Sierra," he said, voice low. "Wow. You look incredible." I tilted my head. "Still using your ex's name to start conversations. Classic." Liam chuckled. "I'm just surprised. I didn't expect to see you back in New York." "Really? I assumed you stalked the speaker list the moment it was published." He laughed awkwardly. "I deserved that." "Yes. You did." He glanced behind me at Reese, who had quietly stepped aside but didn't leave. "And, is that your new guy?" "My partner." "Yes." Liam hesitated. "Partner." I raised my brows. "I know. Surprising, right? Some men don't cheat, sabotage, or implode under pressure." I was shocked too. He cleared his throat. "Look, Sierra. I know things ended badly. But I've been doing a lot of thinking. About us. There is no us, Liam. You threw us away for someone who couldn't handle my success. I made a mistake." "No," I said, voice steady. "You made a choice. Repeatedly. And now you have to live with it." His face twitched. "You're different now. Because I'm not crying in corners anymore?" I asked. "Yeah, that version of me died the night you used my life's work as a bargaining chip." He tried to recover, offering a weak smile. "If you ever want to grab coffee or—" Naomi appeared like a summoning spell, one brow arched, clutching a drink she probably hadn't paid for. "Is this the moment where you ask her out again while her 6-foot upgrade watches from the bar? Because this is more embarrassing than your TEDx talk." Liam's mouth opened, then closed. I didn't need to say another word. His face turned blotchy as he fumbled a goodbye and slinked away. I turned back to Reese, who offered a slow, knowing smile. "Handled it beautifully." "He made it easy," I muttered, walking back to the bar. Later that night, Reese and I sat on the balcony of our suite, the lights of Manhattan flickering like restless stars. "I don't think I could have done this alone," I said. "You did," he said. "I'm just here to make sure you don't have to do it again." I rested my head against his shoulder. And for the first time in a long time I didn't feel haunted. I felt home. Success, I learned, doesn't come with trumpets. It arrives quietly, dressed in the mundane emails, contracts, supply chain headaches, and zoning permits. But even under the weight of logistics and fabric samples, I knew I was standing at the edge of something monumental. My name was about to live in glass and steel. Sierra Blake Atelier, New York. The storefront stood in Soho between a concept bookstore and a minimalist florist that only sold roses in black. It had a corner location, soft golden lighting, and a wall of windows begging to be dressed in vision. Naomi cried the moment she stepped inside. "I always said you'd own something with your name on it," she whispered, wiping her eyes. Reese stood beside her, a hand resting gently on my lower back. "She's not just owning a store," he said. "She's building a cathedral." We held the soft launch exactly 60 days later. No velvet ropes. No screaming influencers. Just the right people. The gallery space showcased 6 signature pieces, limited-run garments named for the phases of my rebirth. Ember, threadbare, molten, ghost skin, silk and smoke, and ash-crowned. Each piece had a placard. Each placard carried a quote. From my journals. My burn book of pain. They left me for dead. I stitched the shroud into armor. The boutique was part showroom, part installation. Fashion. But weaponized. The reviews were immediate. And loud. Sierra Blake is redefining textile rebellion. She survived. Now she sells survival in silk. Feminine rage, framed and wearable. The boutique was profitable by week 2. We had to start a waitlist. By week 3 Vogue reached out. By week 4 someone tried to burn it all down. It started subtly. Suppliers delayed shipments with no explanation. A fabric contractor, one I'd used for over a year, suddenly dropped us due to legal concerns. My online payment platform flagged an unusual traffic source and froze our pre-orders. Naomi stormed into the studio with a folder in one hand and murder in her eyes. "He's behind it." She slapped down a printout of a legal complaint. An anonymous party had submitted a copyright dispute over the threadbare silhouette, claiming it violated the IP of a smaller label based in Brooklyn. "The label doesn't even exist," she seethed. "But the fake registration? Filed under a dummy corporation owned by, wait for it, Harper's cousin." I didn't speak. Didn't flinch. Just picked up the phone and dialed. Reese answered on the second ring. The next day we traced the hosting IP of the fake label. Reese quietly handed the findings to a private investigator who worked in corporate fraud. By week's end the legal concern was debunked, the claim withdrawn, and the supplier quietly offered an apology. But the pattern was clear now. Liam was jealous. And Liam was desperate. He showed up outside the boutique one evening, leaning against a parking meter like some B-list rom-com extra. "Sierra," he said, pushing off it. "Can we talk?" I didn't stop walking. "I'm busy. I know you think I'm the enemy." "I don't think, Liam," I said coldly. "I know." He trailed me down the sidewalk like a shadow that didn't know when to quit. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. But this success. You know it should have been ours." I turned so fast he stumbled back. "You didn't want to build with me," I said. "You wanted to be credited for me. There's a difference." His mouth opened, then shut. I leaned closer. "Every time you try to break what I've built, you remind me I was right to leave. And the more noise you make, the more they see me." I smiled then. "Beautiful. Keep going, Liam. You're my best marketing." He didn't say another word. He walked away. But I knew it wasn't the end. Because men like Liam don't let go when you win. They just reload. Reese was waiting at the boutique when I returned. He didn't ask what Liam said. Just wrapped his arms around me and whispered, "You're bulletproof." "No," I murmured. "But I'm fireproof now." And that was enough. If private sabotage didn't work, Liam would take it public. That's how men like him operated. When stealth failed, they turned to spectacle. But I didn't realize how far he'd go until I opened my inbox and saw the press release. Disputed designer. Boutique owner Sierra Blake accused of copying former fiancé's concept designs. Underneath it was a blurry mock-up of a gown I'd sketched during my engagement, accompanied by screenshots of my current collection. The resemblance was laughable. Fabric barely similar, silhouettes wildly different. But the media didn't care about truth. They cared about clicks. And Liam knew that. Naomi burst into the boutique, phone in hand, already vibrating from a dozen notifications. He sent this to every outlet, she growled. He even pitched a segment to morning TV. I just saw a post that says you stole your ex's ideas while cheating with a European investor. Reese looked up from the studio desk, unfazed. Investor? Apparently that's you now, I said. He leaned back and folded his arms. I always knew I'd end up scandalous. Naomi dropped her phone onto the counter. We need to respond before this snowballs. I looked at the dress Liam claimed was his concept. It was a student-grade sketch. Something I had drawn for him years ago, long before I discovered how to turn pain into form. Fine, I said. Let's set it on fire. Reese and I worked through the night. He combed through old emails, Dropbox folders and archived files. Everything with timestamps. Every draft I had created. Every copyright certification. I drafted a timeline. When I created each design, when it was submitted to Milan's exhibit, when it was registered under my brand. Then we added his name. We didn't need to attack. Just highlight the absence of his contribution. Because silence in this case would speak louder than slander. The next day we dropped our response. It wasn't defensive. It was a declaration. Art comes from pain. Pain comes from betrayal. And betrayal, when exposed, leaves no shadows to hide in. We included side-by-side images. My final gowns. His clumsy sketches. The receipts. The dates. We didn't call him out. We simply showed the truth. The internet did the rest. It took hours for the tide to turn. But once it did, it was brutal. Liam tried to plagiarize the woman he once betrayed. First he lost her. Now he's trying to steal what she became. Reese Callahan and Sierra Blake. The duo redefining power in fashion. He hadn't anticipated that my following had changed. This wasn't pity. This was loyalty forged from survival. People didn't just support me. They tore him apart. His fashion consulting business lost 2 brand clients that week. His speaking engagement at a design school was cancelled, due to controversy. And a viral TikTok of Naomi saying he's just a mannequin with a Wi-Fi password hit 2 million views in 24 hours. But the real win came quietly. 3 days after the public fallout, Liam sent an email. One line. This was never supposed to get this far. I'm done. I stared at it, then deleted it. No reply. Because closure wasn't a conversation. It was an empire standing tall after the earthquake. Later that night, Reese and I sat on the boutique's rooftop terrace. The city buzzed below, but up here, everything was still. He handed me a glass of wine and sat beside me, our knees touching. You didn't just survive that, he said. You obliterated him. I didn't want to obliterate him, I said. I just wanted him to disappear. Men like him don't disappear until they're humiliated. I sipped the wine slowly. Then let him crawl back into whatever shadow he came from. Reese turned toward me, eyes searching. And you? What about me? You've built all this. Fought every war. What comes next, Sierra? I looked out at the skyline. Peace, I said. I want to design from peace, not pain. Reese leaned closer, his voice low and warm. Then let's build that next. Together. The boutique was quiet that morning. Naomi was outsourcing trim materials from Brooklyn, and Reese was upstairs finalizing a virtual showroom mock-up for our upcoming Paris showcase. I was alone, reorganizing samples in the glass cabinet, when the chime above the door rang softly. I looked up, expecting a courier. But it was Liam. Worn. Less polished than the last time. Tie-on, shirt untucked. Not the arrogant brand consultant. Not the man who once called my ambition a phase. This version looked like a man who'd finally realized he'd lost something he couldn't duplicate. Sierra, he said, stepping in. I didn't move. This is your last visit. Make it count. He stopped a few feet away from me, hands at his sides. I came to give you something. I raised an eyebrow. Unless it's an apology with notarized remorse, I'm not interested. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a slim envelope. I signed the papers, he said. The last investment contract we shared. My name's off the patent. It's all yours now. Officially. I blinked, then slowly walked forward, taking it from his outstretched hand. I flipped through it. His signature was at the bottom. No strings. No requests. Why? I asked. Because I can't undo the past. But I can stop dragging it through your future. He looked at me, then really looked. And for the first time I saw the regret. Not performative, not public. Ugh. I was selfish. And stupid. I thought you'd come back. Or fail. Or both. He swallowed. But you didn't. You built something I never could have given you even if I'd tried. I exhaled slowly. Then this conversation's over. He nodded, eyes lingering. Is it really too late? Before I could speak, I heard the soft, deliberate sound of footsteps from the staircase. Reese. His presence filled the space before his voice did. She doesn't belong to the past, he said calmly. And you don't get to haunt the places she's healed in. Liam turned, visibly startled. I'm not here to cause trouble. You already did, Reese said, stepping beside me. But now you don't get to do it twice. I placed a hand lightly on Reese's arm, less to stop him, more to anchor myself. Reese, I said gently, it's all right. Then I turned to Liam, holding his gaze. I don't hate you, I said. That would mean you still mattered. His jaw tightened. I don't wish you failure. I just want distance. Total, permanent distance. You really don't feel anything anymore? He asked. I gave a small smile. I do. I feel relief. He nodded once, slowly, then stepped back toward the door. For what it's worth, I'm glad you found him, he said, jerking his chin toward Reese. I didn't respond. He didn't wait for me to. The bell rang as the door shut behind him. Reese turned to me the moment we were alone. You okay? I think so, I said. He finally said the one thing I never expected. What's that? Goodbye. Later that night, Naomi barged in with 2 bottles of wine and her usual flair. I heard the ghost made his final appearance, she said, collapsing onto the couch. Did we exorcise him, or does he need holy water and legal restraint? I laughed for the first time that day. He's gone. Properly this time. Naomi popped the cork and handed me a glass. To letting the past rot exactly where it belongs. We clinked glasses. And to the men who know better than to try replacing you, she added, shooting a wink at Reese, who was watching us from across the room with that soft look he reserved just for me. That night, I sat on the windowsill of our shared apartment, barefoot and quiet, watching the lights blink across the river. Reese came up behind me, sliding his arms around my waist from behind. He's gone, I whispered. I know. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Or triumphant. And what do you feel? Free. He kissed the side of my head. Then let's build something in that freedom. I leaned into him, knowing deep in my bones. Liam was no longer the story. Reese was. And this time I would write the ending on my own terms. There's something quiet about real love. No fireworks. No dramatics. Just a steady hum, like your favorite song played low enough to live in your skin. That's what being with Reese felt like. Safe. I was brushing the dust off a bolt of silk in the boutique's back room when he stepped in, holding a steaming mug of matcha. For the tyrant in the thread room, he said. I smiled. You know me so well. He walked over, handed me the cup, and brushed a stray lock of hair behind my ear with a touch so gentle it made me forget the ache in my shoulders. Naomi said you skipped lunch again. She spies for you now? She worries. So do I. I looked up into his dark eyes. I'm okay, Reese. Really. I don't want you to just be okay, he said softly. I want you to be happy. Federal rested. Respected. We spent the rest of the afternoon side by side, reviewing custom orders and adjusting production timelines. At one point, I realized his hand rested lightly over mine as we scrolled through fabric palettes. He didn't move it. Neither did I. It wasn't possessive. It was grounding. That evening we went to a small art gallery tucked behind Delancey Street. One I'd always loved but never had time to visit before everything collapsed. The theme was resilience in motion. Fitting. As we moved from painting to painting, Reese kept one hand gently on my back, guiding me through the crowd. Not controlling. Just watching. When someone brushed past me too abruptly, he stepped between us without even blinking. It was such a small thing. But it spoke volumes. Afterwards, we walked the city, hands tucked into our coats, shoulders bumping gently with each step. Why are you really still here? I asked, breaking the comfortable silence. I mean, beyond the boutique. Beyond business. He stopped walking. Turned to face me fully. Because I love watching you rise, he said. And because I refuse to be another man who leaves when you shine too bright. The cold vanished. Or maybe it was just me overheating from those words. I swallowed. I'm not easy to be with, Reese. You're not supposed to be, he said. You've been through war. I'm just here to make sure you never fight alone again. I looked up at him. At the man who didn't flinch when I broke. Who didn't compete when I succeeded. Who held doors and memories without demanding to be thanked. I used to think love had to hurt, I whispered. I know, he said. That's what makes you braver than anyone I've ever known. His hand reached up to my cheek, warm even through the wind. I don't want to replace what you lost, he said. I just want to stand beside what you're building. I leaned in. And for once there were no doubts. Just his lips meeting mine. Steady, sure, the kind of kiss that doesn't beg to be remembered because it already is. We didn't say much as we returned home. We didn't need to. Everything had been said in that moment. Every unspoken promise. Every silent vow. Later that night, while I was curled on the couch with a sketchpad, Reese stepped out from the kitchen holding something small. A box. Before you panic, he said with a half smile, it's not what you think. He opened it to reveal a delicate bracelet, fine gold, engraved with two simple words on the underside. You stayed. I touched it with reverent fingers. Reese. I know what it means, he said. To have someone not stay. To be left when it matters most. He fastened it around my wrist himself. You never have to doubt that with me. I couldn't speak for a full minute. So I kissed him again. Because sometimes, gratitude speaks in the language of lips and silence. The flight back to Florence was quiet, gentle, weightless. I leaned my head against Reese's shoulder, watching as the skyline of New York disappeared behind us, dissolving into clouds. Are you sad to leave? He asked, brushing his thumb along my knuckles. No, I whispered. I already did my goodbyes. He pressed a kiss to the top of my head. Then let's just call this what it is. What? A return to peace. Our flat in Florence still smelled like lemonwood and lavender from the last time I opened the windows. The terrace overlooked a cobbled street where an accordion player always hit the wrong note in the same place, every afternoon at 4. It was imperfect. But it was ours. Naomi had sent 3 texts already. Let me know when you land. Is the art studio finished or do you need me to fly in and insult the lighting crew? Tell Reese to keep his shirt on this time. Some of us have dignity. Reese smirked when I read them aloud. I make one joke about being shirtless and suddenly I'm the boutique scandal. You are the boutique scandal, I said. Then I should at least live up to the title. He walked past me, casually tugging his t-shirt off and tossing it at my face. You're such a menace, I mumbled through fabric. You're menace, he said from the doorway, already halfway into the kitchen. And don't forget it. We didn't do much for the first few days. We didn't need to. Morning coffee. Shared grocery runs. Him leaning over my sketchpad to make dumb suggestions like, can we add sword holsters to this evening gown? I laughed more than I had in years. One night I found him on the studio balcony barefoot looking up at the stars. Do you miss New York? I asked, stepping beside him. Not a bit. Not even a little? I teased. The chaos. The skyline. The overpriced coffee. I have you, he said. That's enough skyscraper for me. I rolled my eyes and kissed him. I mean it, he murmured against my mouth. This, whatever we're building, it doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be real. We spent the next week designing the winter capsule. I worked on thread-bonded lace gowns inspired by firelight and rebirth. Reese started experimenting with a menswear line. The tagline was his idea. For the men who don't fear powerful women, because they love them. I snorted when I saw the first draft. You're serious? Dead serious, he said, arms crossed. Look, I dated women who shrunk themselves to fit their partner's ego. It was miserable. And now, he grinned. Now I get to hold the hand of a hurricane in heels. One morning we walked down to the local bakery, still half asleep and sun-kissed from the window light. I wore one of his t-shirts and he carried my sketch bag. The owner, an old woman named Julia, stopped us at the door. Amore, she said, tapping Reese's arm and gesturing between us. Finalmente. She looks like she sleeps now. She does, he replied in Italian. And she dreams better too. I didn't need to understand the rest of the sentence. The way he said it, like it was sacred, was enough. That night, curled in bed, his arm heavy over my waist, I whispered, "What would you have done if I never came back to New York?" "I would have found you," he said simply. "In Milan. In the Himalayas if I had to." I laughed. "You climbing mountains for me?" "I already have," he said. "They just didn't look like mountains at the time." I turned in his arms to face him. "You never once made me feel like I had to earn your loyalty." "Because you didn't," he said, pressing his forehead to mine. "You just had to heal." The next morning he surprised me with a hand-drawn map. "What's this?" I asked. "Our future," he said. "Well, a sketch of it. I'm still workshopping the roof angles." He had mapped out a small home studio combo outside Florence. Big windows. A glass ceiling over my sewing loft. A garden space. A stone terrace. "I want to build it with you," he said, serious now. "Not for you. With you." I set the map aside, climbed into his lap and kissed him slow. "Yes," I said. That was all. Just yes. To the man who stayed. To the life we were now writing. Together. Think.